Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And we really, obviously, the 10 billion pound elephant in the room is the riots. I'm going to defer to you, Dr. Lopkin, first.
Yeah, this is amazing. And, it goes back to a lot of what we were saying about the anti-Semitic protests and riots. It goes back to George Floyd. It is amazing how these people suddenly decided to protest. And amazingly, pre-printed signs showed up. Gas masks mysteriously appeared. This has nothing to do with immigration. That's just the latest excuse that these professional protesters are using to try to cause havoc.
You know something, that is probably the biggest issue, and I want you to elaborate on that. We have professional, not only protesters, but I think what's more concerning is we have a well-funded left, and you're speaking about how it's funded, Soros, which I can't believe he hasn't been deported yet, and also people that are basically have a hard time dealing with the fact that they were born a multi-billionaire. What I'm referring to is the great-granddaughter of Sam Walton, I believe, who started Walmart. She's actually funding it too, a multi-billionaire. So what is the real issue that I'd like you to comment on? And what I really want you to comment on is, aren't we really up against a communist, hard left force, for lack of a better word, that's really up? We're in a revolution. Is that overreaching?
Yes and no.
Oh, no, well, let me back up. We have revolutionary forces hell-bent.
Yes.
Are they going to be effective? That's a completely different question. But they are hell-bent on a revolution. And your point is amazing. It's the point, and that is that it could be that they ran out of hamburgers at McDonald's, Jews suck, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's cause du jour.
It is, and it's not recent, because according to a report by the LAPD, some of these protesters have been identified, and they have been identified not just as protesting this. They were rioting in 2020 for George Floyd. They were protesting during the Obama administration as part of the Occupy movement. This is all these people do, and law enforcement knows who they are. In fact, it was caught and forced to be taken down, but there was an ad on Craigslist advertising for people to protest that they were going to be paid and outfitted with materials and equipment.
Yes, but let me ask you a question on that. How come there's not better follow-through? I know Biden had no interest in doing it, or at least his administration, but why haven't we done a better job in uncovering this money fund, or whatever you want to call it? I mean, why aren't there, I've been being honest, more intelligence on people like Soros and other of these fund protest groups. I mean, it's a national
Well,
threat. How do we let this go on?
Well, I mean, that's not actually that difficult to figure out. I mean, first of all, the investigations have to start on the local level. Well, take a look at where all these things are taking place. Deep blue cities, they don't want these to stop. Remember in 2020, they didn't even want the National Guard to come in to protect the people. And Governor Hairgel over in California is suing Trump for sending the National Guard in because he doesn't care about the people of California. So, of course, on the local level, it's never going to happen. On the national level, let's take a look at who we've had. First of all, the Biden administration. They're not investigating anything on the left.
No, zero. Nope.
You have Trump's first term. Trump didn't get that much done in comparison because he still had agency heads that were part of the deep state. So they didn't want to rock the boat. They weren't going to go after these folks. Prior to that, you had Obama. Oh, well, Obama's administration wasn't going to investigate this. That takes you all the way back to George W. We didn't have this problem back then.
Yes, no question about it. Yes, and do you think that the current administration, I believe it's true, it's almost a rhetorical question, will do a much better job in doing what we just articulated?
Oh my God. Pam Bondi is already all over it. The Justice Department identified the masked protester that was throwing concrete at ICE agents, at National Guard, and at the LAPD. They've identified him. They have already executed search warrants on his house yesterday morning. He is right now in the wind, but they are tracking him down. And I really hope that he had enough left in his house that will give the Justice Department the leads they need to track that money trail all the way to the end.
Fantastic. Yes, and let's look at another situation, just one among many, obviously. The pickup truck loaded with state of the art mask and other equipment. With AI, and Mr. Wonderful said that when he was talking about the Israeli protesters or anti-protesters, anti-Israeli protesters at Ivy League schools, basically saying that AI technology can identify these people. So what do you think is going to happen there? You have a woman that was out of the truck that's easily identifiable. I could imagine that someone must have a picture of the license plate. That's rich with potential
Well,
information, isn't it?
they don't even have to use AI to identify those people. They know who they are. They have actually, I don't know that they've been identified as individuals, but there are three separate NGOs that have been identified as funding these protests. And of course, that's one of the reasons the Democrats don't want the big beautiful bill to pass and why they don't want USAID cut, because that's where these NGOs are getting their money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why all the upheaval about cutting that. Um, Switching, if that's okay, a little bit to the political ramifications. Last time we spoke, kind of, was the Dems were at 19%. How does this play out politically? And there's been a lot of discussions on how not just the Democrats are without leadership, but they've become the 80-20 party and they're just adrift and captive to their radical leadership. And I do believe it's leadership. So what does this do especially when you say, and even also, could you reflect on this, the Democrats and the media, when they say mostly peaceful? I think it's a really interesting concept, Dr. Lopkin, the juxtapose between 2020, 2019, and now. That kind of had legs, that it was most. I don't, with the decline of mainstream media, corporate media, plus the other avenues like social media, platforms like ours, I don't think it holds as much water. or wait?
No, it doesn't, and that's actually one of the things that's holding the Democrats back, is that they're still using the 2020 playbook. They don't seem to accept that their credibility is shot, the mainstream media's credibility is shot. More people are getting their information from podcasts and social media. And on social media, especially, you're actually seeing the footage of the violence. And I loved Brian Stelter tried to tell people yesterday, oh, you have to be very careful about what you believe on social media because some of the footage they're showing is from yesterday or the day before.
That makes it peaceful.
Right. It's like it's not still going on. It's like, yes, it's still going on. But it is, and quite frankly, if it wasn't still going on, why did Mayor Karen Bass finally decide they needed to institute a curfew last night?
Yes. How about the bigger issue of sanctuary states, failed states? I've heard that yesterday, last night, referring to California. What is going on with Mr. Hair Gel and Bass? These people are completely incompetent. California's in the crapper. Once was the land of milk and honey. I mean, it's kind of, what does this do? Let's first of all, what does this do to Newsom's presidential out? He had that speech last night. It had hardly anything to do with the riot. It was all basically a campaign introductory speech. So what? How does this affect him? Forget about Bass. She's just an idiot.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't think he realizes it or can accept it, but his political career is over. It's done. If he runs for the Democratic presidential nominee, any primary competitor is going to have footage of these riots, of the LA fires.
Well, let me interject something. Dr. Lopkin, let me just interject. Okay, you're talking about the Democratic prime? Because I think that's fine in the Democratic Party. It might be a booster. I think in general election, you're 100% correct. I think the primary, he might not be radical enough. How do you like that?
Well, if he's not radical enough, he's not going to win. But quite frankly, even Democrats, remember, in the 2024 election, every county in the country shifted to the right. That means even Democrats. Remember, you said earlier, the Democrats' approval rating is at 19%. I
think it's lower now. I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah,
go ahead.
You don't get that low without your own party disapproving. So when a more centrist candidate, say Gretchen Whitmer, or there's also talk about the governor of Pennsylvania running, Shapiro, yes. If they run, they will run ads with these images against Newsom, especially if Newsom ends up being the front runner early on. And no state, certainly not New Hampshire and Iowa, who come first, nobody in those states are going to want a president that's going to do that to their state.
I would agree with that. And I also think that, and thank you for your insight, I also believe that he was toast to begin with. And this is just fuel on the fire. I mean, in other words, when I say toast, I think he had a chance in the Democratic primary because he is a strong leader. He might be insane, but he's still, at least he has more strength than any of the Democrats I see. But I think
that's not saying all that much. When the most masculine member of your party is AOC, you have a problem.
Good point. 100%. So I think he was toast to begin with. I think in a general election, I mean, in the primaries, he could make it because it's probably a good thing when your city's burning with the current Democratic Party. But in the general election, I think it's completely over. It would be a landslide, a Reagan-esque. How do you like that?
I think
Landslide.
it
So
would be. In fact, there was a video a friend of mine sent me, a Hispanic gentleman. I don't know who he is. What posted a video on social media, basically telling the rioters to keep going because your stupidity is going to make sure we have strong Republican leadership for the next 8 years.
yes, 100%. Never would think that would happen. Um, Now, a little bit switching a little bit to the actual riot. Um, don't you think I heard a editorial on this? Essentially, welcome to the third world. That's when you let third worlders in undocumented, you turn into a third world country. And in this case, it's a third world state and city. Los Angeles was once an amazing city a while, long time back. Um, and now, I mean, what do you think of protesters carrying a flags of another country? That's an invasion. They're not assimilating. It's an invasion.
No, they don't want to assimilate, but, and we do have to be careful about this because I'm not so sure that that too many of these protesters are actually immigrants. I think these are paid protesters. I'm sure they're finding people, that could pose as immigrants. But I did love this one woman was standing there draped in the Mexican flag yelling California belongs to Mexico and we're going to give it back.
Yeah, I
Well,
saw that. Yeah.
that video, that and a press conference given by the head of the LA Sheriff's Department, that said prior to the National Guard coming in that that law enforcement was completely overwhelmed. Those two videos, if Governor Hairgel's court case ever goes anywhere, which quite frankly it may not, because he went judge shopping for a friendly court, and even they told him Trump is completely within his rights to do this.
Yes, no
So
question about
so
that.
he
Yes.
may not be able to get anywhere. But if any of those court challenges actually get a hearing, those two videos need to be exhibits 1 and 2, because saying that California belongs to Mexico and they're giving it back, that is the definition of an insurrection. That is the definition of an invading force. That gives Trump everything he needs to move forward almost unfettered.
Let me just interject one thing and I want your opinion. I'm sure our listeners would appreciate it as well. Newsom said that he never had a call with Trump. Trump has the log basically proving that there was a call.
Yes,
Not a good look.
Karen Bass claimed that ICE never notified local law enforcement that they were coming. Newsom said Trump never called him. Trump released the call logs showing just how long his call with Newsom was. ICE released the call logs showing exactly who they spoke to in local law enforcement. So almost everything that has come out of the mouths of California leaders, especially, but Democrats in general across the country referring to this riot, has been a complete lie. I don't even want to say that they're manufacturing it. It's a just out and out lie.
Correct. Where does it go?
Well, it's going to backfire on the Democrats. I think there is a good chance if this goes on for too much longer, they can kiss 2026 goodbye. As
I
as
would
it
agree with yes.
as it is. I just said this about Newsom, but the same is going to be true about any candidate in 2026, every Republican is going to have footage of the LA fires, of the riots, and go, this is what Democratic leadership leads to. And
Yes.
they still do not have a platform. Yesterday was the gubernatorial primaries in New Jersey, and the Republican candidate that won the Republican primary, in his acceptance speech, actually referred to the Democratic victor. And forgive me, but I can't remember either of their names at this moment. Um, Said, if you were to play a game and take a shot every time my opponent said the word Trump, you would be plastered from here till election day.
I love that. And I think New Jersey is definitely flippable, correct, Doctor?
Oh, yes. Not only is New Jersey flippable, but the same people that flipped Pennsylvania for Trump last year have been actively working in New Jersey to flip it. So they've got an organization there that is just dedicated to flipping New Jersey.
Yes. Speaking of flipping, we have the media still, even though their ratings have dug mainstream media, excuse me, even though their ratings are plummeting like CNN and others, they're still holding on to the same narrative. They haven't learned their lesson, obviously, and that's really indicative when we look at Terry Moran. Maybe he was drinking. I'm not sure, but a midnight tweet, which is never good, lambasting Miller and Trump. He's gone. It just shows you what's really behind the curtain, doesn't it?
It does, but you're also seeing now, because there has been so much backlash. It's funny because the liberals are yelling, "Oh, the giant media corporations are kowtowing to Trump. They're afraid he's going to go after them." No, they're they're not afraid of Trump. They're afraid of their viewers. They're afraid of their sponsors. There has been so much backlash. This is why the producer of 60 Minutes decided to quit before Sherry Lansing over at Paramount kicked him out. This is why Terry Moran was released. This is why ABC paid the Trump Library $15 million in a settlement because of George Stephanopoulos's comments. They had gone so far to the left, and it wasn't really corporate management. It, for the most part, in some cases it was, certainly Disney and ABC it was, but it was the folks in the newsroom. And now the companies are paying the price. In some cases, literally, there are court cases against ABC, settled one, CBS is involved in one, and quite frankly, nobody expects CBS to be able to win. ABC settled out of court because they knew they couldn't win.
Of course, 100%. Um, so we have that situation. Any final thoughts on the riots in terms of implications? I think you're 100% correct that the footage. Look at the stock shot of the shirtless thug with the Mexican flag on a burning car. That's going to play. Am I correct? I mean, I'm asking you.
You are correct. That is going to play. But there's also, the riots are, well, no, I don't want to say the riots are spreading. The protests are spreading. There were protests in New York, Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Boston, I believe a few others. This is all yesterday. This is all going to be a reflection, though, on Bass and Newsom, because law enforcement stepped in those other cities immediately. Protesters in Trump Tower were arrested immediately for trespassing.
And even, excuse me, Abbott called in the guard like today, like proactively.
Yes,
Yeah.
Abbott called in the National Guard proactively. Every other protest actually stayed peaceful because law enforcement was ready to go. Bass and Newsom just fanned the flames, basically
Good.
saying, go ahead, destroy the city. We don't care.
Yes, and that's true. Flame is the operative word. Switching gears somewhat, or a lot, I should say. Going on the open ocean, we have Greta Thunberg, who was basically did a pre-video on how she was going to be kidnapped by the Zionist occupiers. She was actually fed wrapped lunches, but the key thing is she refused to watch the videos. Isn't that indicative of the far left?
Right. Why let the facts get in the way of a good argument? They don't
Yeah,
care about the facts. They have their point of view. They have belief in their point of view. And that's more important than facts. I mean, yes, we have a point of view on this podcast, but everything I say, you can run a Google search and fact check me. And I've often asked our listeners, please fact check me because if I'm getting something wrong, I want to know about it. But nobody really finds it because we actually do research and rely on facts.
true. Unlike the corporate media and Greta, again, by the way, she has a big depth of education. She's a high school dropout. Very compelling. Her and Bono are just amazing figures. Um, so that's very interesting. We also have on, I would say, an interesting note to me at least is looking, well, we'll flip back to that. The inflation numbers, talking about, again, the Democratic malaise. It's not looking good, is it, when they hung their hat on the tariffs and inflation, and all of a sudden they were interested in the price of eggs. Inflation is almost, compared to Biden, non existent, isn't it?
Yes, according to this morning's report, month over month, we had 0.1% inflation, 0.1% month over month. Year over year, it was 2.4%. Both of these were below expectations and way below what the liberals wanted
Oh,
because
they were praying.
they kept saying, "Oh, he's destroying our economy. Trump is a danger to us." And yet gas prices keep coming down. Inflation is slowing. It's at its slowest point since before COVID. And we are seeing an economy that, while it's not rebounding from the disaster that Biden created, it's certainly getting to the point where it can rebound. And I think once we get trade deals signed, once we get the big, beautiful bill passed, you're going to start seeing things turn around in a very big way.
100%. And when and if that happens, you can say, check please to 2026. Am I correct?
You are. Everything they're hanging their hat on is falling through the cracks. They
Been
kept,
happening to a nicer bunch of people, correct, Doc?
they kept saying they couldn't do anything about the border. The border can't be fixed. It was fixed in what, 2 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
He's causing massive inflation. Well, no. This, the numbers are in, and the Trump economy is much better than it was under Biden. You know, you've got the riots, you've got the pro Hamas protesters that the left is championing, and yet 80% of the country is against it. They keep trying to die on the hill of that 20% that likes these fringe issues, and you cannot win an election with 20% of the vote.
I think it's what we talked about last week, Dr. Lopkin. It's like the alcoholic. Yeah, they know that booze is killing them professionally, physically, blah, 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 relationships, all that stuff, right? They can't help it. I think The Democratic Party is run, I don't know what percentage of it, it's an increasing part of the Democratic Party, by hard left radicals, and the moderates, which is a dying breed, are scared of them. They know it's not
I,
good for them.
I think the moderates are truly concerned about the fate of the party. They realize if the left takes full control, the party is dead. And John Fetterman once again stepped up and said point blank, if we don't come out and condemn this violence, we lose the high ground on every issue. And he's absolutely right. You can't keep dying on the hill of transgender athletes, on anti Semitism. And, I really think a major part of the problem, and I think we talked about some of this last week, is that the Democrats have not accepted the fact that the curtain has been drawn back.
Good.
They have not had a real primary since 2008. They've rigged their primaries to choose their own candidates. And, Bernie Sanders has come out and said this. Numerous Democrats have come out and said this. So this is not, any kind of conspiracy theory. In fact, the DNC admitted to doing this in a lawsuit. When they were accused of it, their defense was, it's our primary. We can do whatever we want with it.
But I thought they were the party of democracy. What's going on here?
Apparently not. But I think they are failing to understand that the hole they've dug is so deep. Nobody, not even the most astute Democratic strategist, can rig an election big enough to overcome this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's going to be interesting how it plays out. In conclusion, someone that's near and dear to my heart, Brian Wilson. Any comment on that?
Yes,
From the Beach Boys, the founder, the inspiration, the genius, tortured genius, but genius.
Yes, Brian Wilson passed away. It was announced earlier today. I'm not sure if he passed away earlier today or last night, but his family announced it earlier today. He was, I believe, 82. And yes, you say tortured. That doesn't even begin to describe it. For years, he literally lived in isolation as a drug addict, suffering from depression. It was a massive blow. He finally came back out of that. This is going back several decades already. Thank God he's been, was good up until that, this point. But a lot of people don't understand the impact that Brian Wilson had on music culture. He literally reinvented music in the 60s. Paul McCartney has said flat out, the Beatles did Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band because they were inspired by what Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys did with Pet Sounds. They were absolutely amazing.
Yes. And I think also a minor point, minor. I think a couple things that were detractors from then, it seems so minor, is they looked old. I don't know how to describe it, right? I mean, and the Beach Boy name, and I think they weren't taking, obviously they were a huge impact. And when they were in their prime in the 70s, they were, right up there with anyone. But I believe that they are, with his death, they will get their deserving accolades.
I certainly hope so. I mean, with Brian Wilson's passing, this is a loss to musical culture, and it needs to be appreciated, not just for the man, but for the impact that he has. I mean, obviously, it's a great loss, on a personal, for his family, all of this, but his contribution to music culture has absolutely been immeasurable.
100%. Well, Dr. Lockton, you were immeasurable as always this edition, and I will be out of pocket next week, but we'll redouble our efforts 2 weeks from now, correct?
Yes, we will be back in 2 weeks. And in the meanwhile, let us know what you think about what's going on. What's your take on the riots, the Democrats, the Republicans? Let us know what you're thinking. What would you like to hear us talk about and dive into deeper? You can contact us at xvadio.com/connect, or you can message us at the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcast app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. See you in 2.
We'll see you then.